Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Teachers Helpline, where teachers help teachers. I would like to begin by introducing our hosts, Amber and myself, Miles. Hello, Amber.
Hi, Miles. How are you doing today?
Excellent, thank you. How about yourself?
I'm doing great.
Excellent. Well, this is really exciting that we can start our talk on such a wide range of interesting topics. Today, we will be covering themes from the Black Lives Matter movement, issues about racism at the Ukraine border during the current invasion, and the Oka crisis. However, before we begin, we have to introduce our special guest speakers and teachers. Please give a warm welcome to Sabrina, Victoria, Tessa, and Cassandra.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hello.
Before getting to the questions, if each of you could give us and our listeners a background of your topic of expertise and how they apply to the education system, that would be great. So Sabrina, we can start with you.
Yeah, so hi, everyone. I'm an elementary school teacher who recently decided to do some more research on the Oka crisis of 1990. Some of you may also know this event as the Kanesatake Resistance or the Mohawk Resistance at Kanesatake. And just for those who don't know, it happened on Mohawk territory that includes some land called the Pines, which is near Oka, about 1 hour north of Montreal. And it was a standoff that lasted 78 days from July 11, 1990 to September 26, 1990. And it was a conflict between Mohawk protesters and the Quebec police and Canadian Army. What started this whole thing was the town of Oka's proposal to expand a golf course and build a townhouse building complex on the Mohawk territory. And there actually was a golf course that was built there back in 1959. And they did not discuss this with the Mohawk people. And in 1989, there was a proposal to expand this golf course again on their territory. It was to expand it to 9 holes more. And this included land, of course, that was sacred to the Mohawk people, including a burial ground. So, of course, this was offensive to them and led to months of protests, violence, some deaths, and riots that people all over the world heard about. And it also inspired some Indigenous people around Canada to start their own protests, whether it be roadblocks, blocking of bridges, even railways, to show solidarity with the Mohawk people and as a symbol of them protecting their lands. So I think this is definitely a type of event that's worth talking about in class because it could help students better understand the history and the injustices that occurred not even far from them, and to gain knowledge about what happened in the past and why certain things are the way they are today. And it could also help them critically think about events and take a moral stance and give them tools to recognize and understand different forms of injustice. So I think it's definitely important to talk about.
Thank you for sharing, Sabrina. I agree. I think it's very important to talk about these things. Cassandra, if you could tell us a little bit more about the Black Lives Matter movement, please.
Yes, of course, I'd be delighted to. So I'm Cassandra, and I'm a sociology major and now a teacher who worked closely with the founders, so the amazing women who created the Black Lives Matter movement in 2013, which are Alicia Garza, Patrice Cullors, and Opal Tometi. And I've been really interested with the factors that have played a role in institutionalized racism, which is one of the big prompting questions of the Black Lives Matter movement, because they want to create a more equitable and just society in terms of the justice system and also for police brutality. And a large part of my studies and my independent research that familiarized me with this topic has been looking at the different perspectives, understandings, and realities of the people who have who take part in the Black Lives Matter movement and who have experienced police brutality and governmental neglect that obviously targets certain populations. And in my case, it's specifically the Black communities. And I've worked closely with them to familiarize myself with their subjective experiences as I am someone who lives in a non-Black body. And I think it's really important that we have to critically look at our own assumptions and, preconceptions when evaluating and investigating this type of situation. So in terms of the education system, there's been a really big surge and uprise in the Black Lives Matter movement with the killing of George Floyd and other people in the United States. And that's why there's been even protests in Montreal that happened last summer. And for the education system, it has its place across all grade levels, and it should not just be something that's addressed in February when it's Black History Month. It needs to be covered throughout the course at all times. And I've studied and discussed this as something that's happening in the present, because sometimes racism and discrimination is focused on the past, and we think about slavery and things like that, and teachers aren't necessarily equipped to talk about what are the institutionalized racisms that are happening today and in our society, not only in the United States, not only in third world countries, but in our own environment. And it's really important too, because we teach diversified students, and this is a sensitive topic that could hit close to home for many. So I'm really a pro to, I really advocate for this being incorporated in the classroom. And I hope sharing my knowledge, studies, and expertise will help all of you future educators be a little bit more comfortable with talking about it as well.
Thank you for sharing. I agree. I think that this is definitely a topic that could be included in all grade levels at the elementary level. And last but not least, we have Victoria and Tessa.
Yes, hi. So Victoria, will be just going over the intro, and then we'll be going back and forth throughout the rest of the podcast. But Tessa and I are also elementary teachers. We are found believers of taking what is happening in the world and transferring that into the curriculum. So we're obviously staying in tune with what was happening between Russia and Ukraine, and then them invading the borders. And we took some interest in this topic because we wanted to gain new and relevant topics to discuss with our students. So during the time of the invasion, there was discussion about racism and how we think that society is more anti-racist than ever now, but is that actually true? So Tessa actually brought to my attention some articles that discuss racism and segregation of minority Ukrainian citizens and what they were facing. So for instance, if any minority Ukrainian citizens were going to the border and trying to get across, they would actually be taken out of lines, really long lines, and segregated into their own line. And most times they would not even be able to cross the border within 2 or 3 days, while others that look maybe more European or more like a Ukrainian citizen were their wait time to cross the border was significantly cut in half. So we started to take a deeper look into this, and what we found is that all citizens that do not look like a typical European candidate, like I said, are facing tremendous amount of racism. So not to get into all the details now, but we as educators, we need to keep students interested and allow them to reflect on what is going on in the world. And this is the best way to do it is by including that into our curriculum. And then there's nothing worse. I don't know if you guys remember, there's nothing worse in school, learning about something that does not relate to your own life and trying to find meaning and trying to make it meaningful to remember it throughout your years. So that is, I think, what teachers need to be doing now, is taking what is happening in the world and incorporating it into the lives we are living today.
Thank you for sharing. I also think it's important to bring topics of current events into the classroom so that students can relate to now and not only what has happened in the past. All right, so the lines are now open for your questions to come in. So you guys can send them in now and I'll ask our experts. Perfect. So we have our first question. And the question is, what do you think talking about these types of events and themes say about classroom instruction? So I think we can begin with Cassandra.
Awesome. So that's such a good question to start off the discussion with. So I definitely think that including these topics, and all of the topics that these women are presenting today are phenomenal, but specifically to the Black Lives Matter movement, I think it shows that we have an open and comprehensive learning environment, because we're talking about real life situations and bringing them into the classroom, not just focus on theory and events of the past, which is important. We need to understand the past to be more critical thinkers of what's going on in society today. But, you know, when talking about the Black Lives Matter movement, as I said before, if we just focus on slavery or times in the past where Black bodies, Black communities were not treated fairly, you know, that's a limited perspective and approach. Whereas if we learn about in history class about events of the past, of how these groups of people were treated, and then we fast forward to today and look how there's still issues of inequality, racism, institutionalized prejudices and stigmas attached to these people, you're really allowing students to understand these concepts in a comprehensive way, and they really can through discussion. And discussion is one of the ways we can address it, but there's also other dynamic ways that we can address this in the classroom. We can also use projects where they present something, do their own independent research, and really taking on a student-centered, oriented approach in the classroom instruction. So allowing students to come up with their own questions and not necessarily having me as the instructor or you or our audience who are asking these questions have everything ready to go and you determine what you're going to teach the students. Allow students to have their own driving questions, their own inquiries, and to notice the injustices that happen in society and talk about it in a really open, interesting, and engaging, truthful way that's obviously age appropriate.
I really like how you said it takes real life situations and brings them into the classroom, because a lot of times when we teach students, it's a lot of theory. And so to have something like something that's happening like currently, and that emphasizing that this is happening to like people in real life now, really enhances their comprehension and the learning experience. So thank you so much for answering the question. Victoria, or well, Tessa, actually, I think it's your turn to speak on your topic of expertise.
Yes, hi. So yeah, my colleague Victoria did do the introduction and explained our topic, and I'm just going to elaborate more on this question. So talking about these types of events and themes can open the students' eyes to real life issues around the world. However, I think that educators need to consider explaining these worldwide issues to students with more appropriate vocabulary and language that the students are more familiar with, depending on their grade level. And as these themes are fairly touchy as well, either regarding the themes overall or if they relate somehow to themselves, it can be very triggering for the students. So thus the teachers, I believe, must learn ways to introduce these topics through different resources. So like books, videos, and like I said before, depending on the level of educator that they're teaching, they can even do their own research. Like the students, if they're older, can do their own research and present it to their class and have a sort of classroom discussion, which I believe is very important because it's very good for the students to have discussion and interaction with each other and see how their peers are seeing these types of events and issues in the world. And it's very important for them to talk amongst each other. And I think it'll be a very comfortable environment as well, because they're all doing like their own discussion and talking about these worldwide events amongst each other. So yeah.
Yeah, I think you brought up a really good point. And I think that sometimes teachers maybe shy away from talking about the topics that we're talking about today. So it's really important to consider the vocabulary and to include these sensitive topics in an appropriate way for the students, depending on the grade level, or maybe, I don't know, like being sensitive to students who maybe are going through, their families are going through similar things. So it's important to be sensitive and understand that these are touchy subjects, as you said. Sabrina, would you like to share?
Yeah, I'd like to start by saying that I completely agree with what you ladies have just said. I think what this says about classroom instruction, it's like it can mirror and reflect things that are going on in today's world. And when we focus on events that occurred in the past, so like, of course, the Oka crisis has happened in 1990, but I think every time we talk about a subject, it should be used as like a bridge to connect the past and to connect the present. So this event, for example, could immediately start conversations that go back to the beginning of colonization and how it led up to that. And it can also be used to bridge what is currently happening, how things have or have not changed, and why things are the way they are right now. So I think it's important to use things from the past, like slavery as well, to connect to the Black Lives Matter movement, and to always use historical events in a way that's not just like to students, oh, this is what happened in the past and let's move on, you know, to really always try to connect the things to either before or after. And I think this is what students want to know too, because it does spark curiosity, like, oh, well, how is it today? Did they eventually, you know? So I think it's important to use these events, historical events, as bridges to the past and the present.
Yeah, I really, really like how you said bridge to connect the past to the present. I think that children, especially at the elementary school level, they really need to make connections. And I think that connections make a deeper understand, like has them have a deeper understanding of what you're trying to teach them. And so I like how you said to see what changed, why it changed, why it hasn't changed, and to be able to even apply like knowledge of something from the past, like the Oka crisis, to what is happening today and how it relates to each other. So thank you so much for saying the bridge that connects the past to the present, because I think that's a really nice way to put it. All right, so you guys all bring up some really good points, and it's important to bring real life situations into the classroom. Now I'm going to go on to another question that just came in. Would you say that these topics are meant for education and are important to bring into the classroom? And if so, how would you personally use it in your classroom? Cassandra?
Yeah, so Amber, you actually said it not so long ago when Tessa was explaining her perspective, to not shy away from talking about difficult topics. I'm totally on board with that. And we are all talking about pretty heavy stuff right now. And when you think about elementary school, oh, these are really young learners, but there's always, in my belief, an age-appropriate way to bring up these topics and to have them think critically about them, depending on the way that you present it. And so I do think they have their place in the classroom, and we want to educate students for them to be able to think and understand society, to be able to really start seeing and looking at inequality, discrimination, and injustice. And it needs to be brought up so that they can evaluate the way that they treat others, the things that they see, the conversations that they observe, or that they even experience in their own personal lives, not only society at large. And you know, my view of the education system is that we're working towards creating better citizens that will foster and work towards creating a better society. And how else are we supposed to do that than examining issues of power, privilege, and struggles of the current society we live in to try to create a more equitable one? And this starts by taking young learners and looking at these issues, because they're the ones who are going to end up having to make these policy changes and work towards changing society. So we want to really bring that up at a young age so that we can, you know, we're not living about with assumptions, prejudices, and stigmas of the past that have been brought on from generations. We're trying to break that cycle right from the early ages. Maybe not kindergarten, but, you know, starting cycle 1, they can learn about the word inequality. That's totally appropriate. So I really think it does have its value and its place in the education system.
Yeah, I think you brought up some really good points. I think that one of our jobs as educators is to have those students, have students become functioning members of society, and we have to provide them with the information to be able to be that. And so I think that having them become critical thinkers and understand that like these situations happened in their world is really important. Like we shouldn't, as you said, like shy away from talking about difficult topics. It's really important for them, if they do become functioning members of society, to have all the information provided to them, obviously in an appropriate way. What about you, Sabrina?
Yeah, I totally agree. And also, yeah, all three of our topics here do touch on racism, on violence, on just injustice in general. And I think if we're going to be teaching not only these events that of course could be taught in the context of history, but if we're going to be talking about these subjects, these themes, I don't think it could be like categorized to necessarily just one area, one subject. I think it's good to make connections within subjects. So you could teach injustice and what that means in the context of history, of social studies, but also link that to English class to have students do some creative writing that has to do with that. And I think really making these connections with all the subjects tied together teaches students that this is really important and that they can use that in not for just like one history exam or just one specific subject, but that it applies to multiple subjects and to their everyday lives as well.
Yeah, and I think also, as I mentioned before, like we're having them become functioning members of society and to understand the world around them. But there's also certain topics, like specifically the Oka crisis for like children in Quebec. They're taught a lot in our curriculum from the colonizers' point of view. And so to bring in different perspectives through these types of topics really twist what they know and challenge their thinking. So I think that it's really important to continuously like bring it into the classroom. And as you said, not just in one specific subject area, but you can put it in practically anything. So I think it's important to do so and not feel so limited to only, I don't know, bringing up this topic in a social studies classroom or only in when you're, I don't know, like the Black Lives Matter movement for the Black History Month. Like you need to like push the boundaries and you need to go further for your children to understand that this isn't just like a one-time thing or something that you can talk about only when we're doing this type of subject. So Victoria, would you like to add on?
Yeah, so honestly, I think there's a common thread throughout all three of our topics about racism. And honestly, like racism happening throughout the Ukrainian borders is definitely an appropriate event to discuss. I know people like you guys been saying that like we don't need to shy away. It could be a part of the curriculum, definitely, but a major way of how students and people in our daily life kind of learn about these problems and issues is through the media. And most times students are only given the most popular form of media and don't understand the other factors that are happening during those troubling times. So without showing students not only what occurs beneath the surface, but also shedding light on modern racism, we will not sufficiently be providing students with the proper knowledge for the future. So we must take current issues and current instances and manipulate them to serve the purpose of students learning now. So students will understand the depths of the curriculum, but also the society and then being immersed in the life that they live right now.
Yeah, I think you brought up a really important point. I think that sometimes even students, when we talk about only events that have happened in the past, they kind of just think like, okay, that's history. But bringing in something that's actually happening at the moment is something that, you know, we can prove the point that like it still happens today, and then we can make those connections with history. So thank you so much. I agree with all of you. I think that all of these events are appropriate to discuss, and we definitely should not shy away from addressing them within the classroom.
Oh, it seems like we received two questions, and we'll have to shut down the line after these. But one of the questions actually is asking if by teaching these concepts or topics, how can we as educators support active learning? How can we get students to engage and learn actively when teaching these types of difficult topics?
Yeah, I can start. I actually have, lots of questions are coming in. Wow, so great. I'm happy that teachers are interested in what we have to say today. So some tools or some strategies that I've used in my own practice or that I've talked about with my colleagues that I'd love to share is to bring in guest speakers. Specifically for me, I'm working with the Black community. So bring in people who are part of that activism and who have taken part in the protests, who have taken part in the strategizing and the thinking of how what the needs are of this community, and providing students with the background knowledge and information from, I would say, from the primary source. And obviously I've done research, but like I've said before, you have to take, you have to be, you have to recognize that I'm not a member of this community. So no matter how much research and studies I do not have the experiences and the firsthand, you know, the firsthand knowledge of what the people in this community know. So I've always believed in bringing in guest speakers and presenting the different perspectives that allow students to draw their own conclusions and understandings of the issue at play. So in introducing the perspectives of the police, of allies, of the government, and looking at the contradictions, looking at the problematic conversations, and really making students their own sense makers, right? I don't want to give them the answer. I want to present them with a problematic statement that, let's say, François Legault said, and ask students to think critically with the knowledge that they know, that they've acquired throughout their English classes, throughout their social studies classes, really engage in that active learning and be able to explore media, create their own projects, interview people of their own. And something that I'll just end on is also getting involved in the community. I've said that there was a surge in the Black Lives Matter movement because of the police shootings that happened in the United States. But there's issues of violence, discrimination, racism that's happening in Montreal today in our own community. So what limits us to getting involved with our own community to gain a comprehensive understanding of the issue? I think that would be a really great way as educators, that's worked in my practice and that I hope would work in the practice of all of the educators listening, to get students actively involved.
Oh, absolutely, Cassandra. I agree with you 100% that getting involved with the community is probably one of the most important aspects we can do as educators. Amber, did you have one other question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask everyone if they had a specific subject area that they think they would most likely use these topics in. Cassandra?
Yeah, so as I said before, just answering Miles' question, sorry, I think I jumped the gun over here. I must have, had a premonition about that question that was about to come. So I've explored this subject in English, looking at the different terminology as I've expressed injustice, racism, the government, looking at all of these words, explored different readings and writing, looking at pieces. There's a lot of slam poetry that's been done about this issue from actual survivors or people who have encountered this type of discrimination of the justice system or police brutality. There's been in-class discussion activities around the topic. I think that's a really great way to address it in an English class, so in the ELA classroom. But of course, as we've mentioned across Sabrina, Victoria, and Tessa, that we're trying to link the past to the present. So of course, social studies, specifically history, it's super important to look at the past, the trends of discrimination and inequity of Black communities, to examine really the similarities and differences. So, doing projects like making timelines, Venn diagrams, different types of, even I really like when students get to visually see the trends, so allowing them to do kind of projects that reflect their own observations, thoughts, and actions. And yeah, I think those are really great ways to address it within those specific subject matters, but I'm sure there are more ways to do it as well. That's just what I've done in my own practice.
Thank you for sharing. And Tessa, what about you? What subject area would you incorporate these in?
So I think that we would incorporate this in social studies class. I believe because we're talking about these social issues, that it would be well appropriate to talk about Ukrainian border racism, Black Lives Matter, and the Oka crisis in this subject subject field or subject matter. And I just give an example quickly, that the way that we saw this racism in our topic is through social media posts. So I think it's very important to talk about how social media can be very, very just like effective on people, and how those people that are actually doing the racist comments are not even like Ukrainian or anything like going towards the Ukrainian-Russian war. It could be anybody that can do this type of like discrimination on these people. So it's very important to bring up the topic of social media to the students in social studies class, because again, it goes revolving around social aspects and social problems in the real world. So I think it's very important we can discuss this in our classroom.
Thank you so much for sharing. Miles, back to you.
Okay. And sorry, because I did receive a question in relation to the SAMR model. Are you familiar with the SAMR model?
Yes, we are familiar with the SAMR model. So I just gave a quick, I wanted to talk about a little bit what it's like, what it's called and what it means. So it's like substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. So it's basically just like kind of integrating media into the classroom. So me and Victoria are very familiar with this, and we have created this for teachers to be able to share topics through personalizing learning and language to help students visualize these complex concepts. So we gave the background of it, and using this model, we can encourage teachers to integrate technology in their classroom to enhance the information being taught. So I'm just giving a quick example as well. The teacher can use digital articles and information on the students through tablets or laptops, which can incorporate very important research in the classroom. And yeah, so do you guys want me to go a little bit more in depth in each like category, or do you guys kind of like get the gist? Like, I don't know if you guys want me to do that.
Well, the question that I did receive that was asking about how it would be possible to link teaching of these topics to that model. Thank you for the brief definition. That was
okay. So, I mean, I have some examples unless somebody else wants to add on. I don't know.
Yeah, if you want, I can provide a little conclusion to that if you want. So just
For sure. Yeah, go
looking
ahead.
at different as you said, Tessa, looking at different multimedia posts to understand the different perspectives. Students can create their own portfolios of an area of research using a platform with their peers. They can use, we can also assess students through online platforms like Kahoot, where students can share their understanding of the factors in play that interact with one another. So I think these are all amazing ways to include the ASMR model that you described perfectly, Tessa.
Oh, wow. What fantastic. Thank you very much, Cassandra. And I just want to say what fantastic definitions and explanations you gave us all today, and the topics that we covered. I would like to thank you all for coming to our podcast and bringing these topics to our viewers' attention. My final question before closing is, how can we engage each of these topics critically?
Yeah, I think we all mentioned it, but just looking at different perspectives, incorporating the different forms of media, and engaging students in active learning is just what it's all about. And I think there's consensus about that all around.
Okay, are we all in agreement?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yes.
Wow, what fantastic topics we covered today. Thank you all for coming to our podcast and bringing these topics to our viewers' attention. There's such great answers and explanations on how we can look at these themes through a critical lens. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I would like to personally thank each and every one of our guests for joining us today and sharing your knowledge. Until our next episode, see you soon.